Everybody, welcome to From the Constituency. I'm Brian Calfano, and joined by our Ozarks First contributor, Nick Reed, who's also the morning show host over at 1041 KSGF-FM. Nick, as always, good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, good to see you.
Now, here's the deal. Every time I see something happening that I think intersects with just political ideology and the question of how involved should government be in trying to solve our problems, I invariably think of you and what must be going through your mind when you see episodes like this latest political food fight, I guess we can call it, regarding the status of a city that a lot of people probably have maybe been to who are watching this, or at least have heard of with its aquarium and other things it has. It's Baltimore, and President Trump getting into a bit of a kerfluffle with Elijah Cummings, who is the congressperson who oversees most of that district, or represents most of that district. Your thoughts on this fight over whether or not Cummings is responsible, essentially, for the infested nature, as the president referred to it, of Baltimore City?
Right. Well, there are a few angles on this. I mean, let's just talk about the reality itself. Now, you can have all the politicking and the world, you can have all the back and forth, but there's a reality. I mean, just go there. Talk to the people who live there. The two of the most well-known shows ever made based in Baltimore, Homicide: Life on the Street, is about homicide, and the other one's The Wire, which is about the drug and murder problems in there. That didn't happen there for because of a coincidence. Baltimore is a horrible place, relatively speaking, for many, many people who live there, and unfortunately, disproportionately to a great degree for the African American community. How anyone can, first off, hold up elected leaders there as heroes based on results is a total detachment from reality. I don't care what party you are. I don't care what ideology you are. I don't care what you think the answer is versus what the answer isn't. The first thing that has to be acknowledged is that Baltimore is not this wonderful place everyone likes to live in like some people are acting. Specifically, and a lot of this stuff, like, hey, it ain't my problem. There's one area it really, really does tick me off, and it's when it comes to the kids there. You have generation after generation after generation of absolute and utter failure for kids in those schools. You have a third of young black students that have zero proficiency in math and in English and just the very basic fundamentals. Zero proficiency. That's a third of, and it happens again and again and again. The minute anyone comes in and says, we need to fix this problem, they're shot down. Anytime anyone says, at least let parents choose if they want to send their child to another school, they get blocked. Can't do it. School choice, no way. And while all of that's done for political reasoning, you have these kids that are having their lives absolutely destroyed because of that. And that ticks me off. And then what ticks me off further is there is no interest in actually fixing it by the people who are running that city. They're the same people over and over again. And unfortunately, the voters put them in over and over again. At some point, politics aside, I mean, if you had a privately run school that had generation after generation of turning out students that had zero proficiency in the very basic fundamentals, no one would be sending their kids to that school. That school would be shut down, and they'd probably be investigations.
I guess my question, though, would be, is this something Cummings can actually deal with? Because the way this started was Cummings is going after the acting Secretary of Homeland Security for conditions on the southern border with those detention centers, and he's questioning whether, what's up with having kids sitting in their feces, right? And then this prompts Trump to basically say, well, have you seen Baltimore? Paraphrasing, obviously. But what Cummings is doing is exercising constitutionally mandated congressional oversight over the executive branch. He doesn't get to run Baltimore. I know they're all friends and they're all part of the same Democratic network. But really, exactly what can Cummings do?
All right, well, it isn't, to me, it's not so much about Cummings himself. It is about the approach that he and and the Democrat Party has consistently adopted and put forth. So for me, anyhow, and I understand the politics of it and the point that Trump was making, it's not about Cummings as an individual and it's his ineffectiveness. It's the ineffectiveness of the ideology that he pushes constantly. The ideology that he and the Democrat Party tell all of these people. I mean, it's truly ironic that they tell, particularly when it comes to minorities, when it comes to young African Americans, you need Democrats to be in charge because if Republicans get in charge, your life's going to be horrible. Look at it now. I mean, the murder rates, the rape rates, the violent crime rate is 300 to 400% higher than the national average there. You literally, everybody's made a big deal out of the rats, out of his comments about rats. There was a documentary 2 years ago on PBS in Baltimore about, it's called Rat Something. It was about that very issue.
Let's make you king of Baltimore, Nick, and you have impunity. We'll give you 3 to 5 years to turn it all around. What would you do? And as a sub-question to that, what role would be appropriate for government to play under the administration, the Reid administration?
Right. Well, law enforcement would probably be an area that there would be just a little more funding for. I mean, really, so you've got crime and you've got schools. I mean, these are the two biggest areas that the problems are coming from, and the lack of education is what is helping really feed the problem when it comes to crime. I mean, every single person that works within the Baltimore school district would be gone. They would be gone. I mean, I'd fine, give them pensions, whatever. Concerned not about money. I mean, if I'm king of the world, king of Baltimore, I'd say, you know what, we'll continue to pay you, but you are out of this because number one priority the kids. And I would bring outside people who have proven track records, not people who get, who are head of some teachers union, not that, but probably private school. I would look at what has worked. Where are the success rates? Where is it? Take those people, and they'd probably be out of the private school sector. I'd bring them in, and you'd also have school choice. Because fact of the matter is, parents are oftentimes a problem. And you can have a school that requires learning, requires discipline, but if you allow parents to come in and, start taking the side of the child who's disruptive and not allowing the school to do its job, then you're going to just go back to the same problems that you have. I mean, it's not all the school. There's a relationship there. But if you give those school choices and you do say, listen, you're fine. Your child is a problem here. They're not here to learn. They're no longer going to be in this school. And that may not, at the very least, you're not necessarily going to make every parent wake up and every child say, oh, I don't want this. But what you begin to do is you begin to compartmentalize the parents and the students that actually do want to learn so that they are given a chance instead of being drugged down by everyone else. And then you come up with another plan for the students that are problem students. So at least you can begin. Right now, the pool is so contaminated that no one is coming out of the education system alive. I don't mean literally alive, but, I mean, it is a horrible, awful mess. And it is a sin that we act as if, everything's fine there. And that the moment you have a president, because of who he is, point out, this is horrible, this place is awful, they begin running to the defense of the people who have been in charge, calling them heroes. And I mean, it's just, no one cares about the end result in Baltimore.
And we're going to talk to your colleague Amy here in a minute about how she's going to solve this problem. We'll see what she's got in terms of ideas. But this was great. I appreciate it, Nick. You're getting people thinking about what's going on, and we're going to see you quickly soon. We'll have more of our Ozarks Tonight.
So
Nick and Amy chats.
Government
I don't know what we're going to call them,
fix
but
problems.
hey.
Well, eventually. You should do an online, you sell it.
Yeah. What do you want us to call ourselves? Exactly.
Give a name. Have it sponsored.
We're going to bring this up for sure because this is a continuing issue, not just Baltimore, but Los Angeles, Chicago, these major cities, St. Louis.
Yeah, that all have something in common, by the way.
I know what you're going to say. And for another view on this issue about Baltimore and America's cities and who gets to blame, of course, it's our other primary Ozarks first contributor, Amy Blancett. Sorry for calling you other. You're not an other, but you're
I'll take it. I'm glad to be a part of this.
Great, and we're glad to have you on because you have so much experience dealing with the issues of poverty and other challenges that municipalities face. What do you make of this thing with Baltimore and President Trump and Cummings and the whole issue?
Part of it, I'm confused on where the racial part came in and why it's taking away from the main conversation. And the conversation is we have a list of 50 cities that all are poor quality of health. Our safety is a concern. Springfield's 8 on this list. We're living it. And we need to put these comments and these sidetracks away. And we really need to look at what's going on and why. That's kind of what we talk about in poverty. We've got to go to the root. Name calling and finger pointing gets us nowhere.
As we said with Nick and talking to him, where do you begin and really what's the focus of government in all of this? It's not just spending money. That seems to be what's been done in places like Baltimore and other big municipalities across the country. So, Amy, with all of your experience in trying to do things at sort of the grassroots or the micro level,
Absolutely.
What's government's appropriate role for all this?
Well, and that's really, an important question. And we look at the government coming in and saying, hey, this is what worked in another city. You guys must do this. Here's a new policy or that never works. And I'm kind of concerned and confused on why we continue to put money in from government in programs that aren't effective. So instead, when we see for systemic change to really occur, it has to occur from within. We talk about down to like the root of what's happening in some of the most dangerous communities. Change begins to happen when individuals that are from within that community begin to change the culture. So how do we begin to fund things that we know that are effective? They're human intensive, and that means they're expensive, but they have a greater payout in the end. Do we continue to put the Band-Aid on things? Do we add more police? That doesn't change the culture and it doesn't change the behaviors that are causing us to need that. So what we've got to look at is where and how we're spending money. Projects like the Northwest Project, Project Rise, there's Empath and other poverty programs across the nation that do focus on this idea of not just the people, but where they live has to be a part of the change we're trying to create.
But it takes money at the end of the day. It's not about not spending money.
It's about how we spend it. It's about spending it on programs that see people as people. It sees them where they are. It sees the culture that they grew up in, and that's why they're making the behaviors that they're making. We all behave based on the culture that we live in. How do we begin to change the culture? And it has to be from relationships that are deep relationships. The reason that you and I begin to think differently about something and act differently is because someone that's close to us or someone that we admire teaches us a different way to do it, or people like us are doing things differently. And that's where we've got to look at what programs are doing that human intensive, that personal touch, and then multi-generational. We've got to make sure that kids that are coming into age also aren't having, this is the only thing they know. It's the only way they're going to behave.
I mean, it's just, I can't understand how it is then that you have all these people, these smart people in these major cities. Baltimore is getting the attention now, but you could easily talk about Chicago, St. Louis, Los Angeles, Detroit. You go on down the list. You've mentioned Springfield is in the top 10 and a not very good list.
Correct.
What was it again? Poverty level?
No, this was a list that was created that looks at the quality of life of a community, and it includes a number of factors. Crime is one of them. They definitely look at crime per capita, but it's also looking at poverty, education, attainment, things that say my quality of life is high or I'm at high risk for being in poverty. So poverty is a part of it, but not the only calculator. So they look at, I think, 5 main areas, really 8 or 10 of them, to say this city does not have what it takes for an individual to increase, capacity or have, a safe place to live. Why are we not putting funding into things that change those 5 items, not just things that cover them up? Putting more police force on the streets might make us feel safer, but until we go and change the behaviors that are causing us to need that, we're just going to have to keep adding officers. The same with poverty programming. If we don't go upstream and figure out educational attainment and capacity for quality jobs, then we're going to continue just as a government taxing those who can be taxed in order to continue supplementing. So we pay or we pay. And it's how about we start looking at programs that are changing the culture and the systemic problems.
Where do we go with the existing spending? Because you're always going to have people who say, well, you got to spend money on the existing programs, and they don't want to have those programs cut. So then what happens if you start changing around the formulas, and then you're going to tick off certain constituencies that have become used to what they're getting?
And that is, it's one of those things in the nonprofit world when we're looking at less giving in the non-government realm of it, that we've got to be very effective and very efficient. We're employing individuals, so it's humans. And when we talk about cutting programs, we are talking about putting people out of business. Or instead of cutting programs, we look at how do we redesign the programs. Just because we've been doing something doesn't mean that we should continue doing it when we learn that the outcomes are not effective. So instead, how is it that we can begin measuring differently and engaging those who are in programming now to either collaborate, use different material that's proven to be effective. Again, my specialty is poverty, not crime, and those sorts. So we know that there are a number of companies that are out there that are showing effective results. As a nation, how do we look at a collaborative group bringing these organizations together, using the best of those, and then sharing information? We have a problem in our nonprofits and in our even government-funded programs that are in these areas of social determinants to health of very much not sharing, or if I'm going to give you information, you're going to have to pay a lot for it. And so in this competitive nature that we have, we're creating part of the problem. We've got to look at, with Drew Lewis Foundation, we're saying everything we create is free. It is going to be online. Anyone can access it. We'll teach you how to use it because we're serving humans. We're serving, and we want to see that more people are served, and we don't want a price tag being the reason that someone isn't getting the education or the support that they need in order to start programming in their community. So I don't know, if more people who have less pride and are willing to do what's right for more than a small group of people.
Really a Gordian knot in some ways.
It is.
But
it is. And that's difficult. And when we start, like you said, how do we begin to shift funds into programs that are effective? And like I said, something that's effective in Waco may not be as effective in Baltimore because we've got something as simple as transportation. If we have a better transportation system in one community than another, now people can access, in a different capacity. So now we have to have more hubs in an area that doesn't have good transportation. So it still has to be very individualized. And when honestly government gets involved and we create a law and a policy and something that wraps around it, we create, instead of mission and an idea of here's the guardrails, we create speed limits and then we police those speed limits and we can never go outside those, even though it might be what's right. We spend a lot of money that we shouldn't be spending just because if we don't spend it, we're not going to get it next year. And so we've created a system with government involved that isn't always effective. But without government involved, then like with Drew Lewis Foundation and Project Rise, we've got to look at sustainability. And sometimes that means how do we collaborate and have both a kind of quasi-government, programming to where we do have citizens who care and are engaged, as well as government that creates some sustainability, but it allows us with checks and balances to spend the money in the way that's best for the people that are being served. We're seeing that adding government hasn't been effective, and we're seeing that citizens, there are so many problems that it's, which one am I passionate about? Which one am I going to commit my time and money to? And then it almost becomes overwhelming even when you select, okay, I'm going to work on childhood poverty or I'm going to work on crime in my community. Then even that opens up to an overwhelming, where do I even get started? And so it is one of those where, yes, from within, from these grassroots efforts, that's where we see the greatest change, but we have to fund them. And if we're not going to be doing it out of the goodness of our hearts, then where does the money come from? So it is this constant battle of if we're being taxed, the tax dollars, I want to see my money going into serving others. Yeah, I also want my potholes fixed, but I'm going to see more value in the money that I'm giving back to my country if it's in human capital. And then honestly, we all improve when human capital improves.
We're going to pick this up, all three of us, in front of the camera together. So Amy, thanks again for this. Always enlightening hearing your perspectives on this critical issue that will
it is critical.
only get more important as the years go by. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Fred.